Let's explore autistic history and the Autism Wars. This is part 26 of a series. We are in the 1990s learning about autistic community and how it was developed through Jim Sinclair's article written and published in 2005 titled Autism Network International, the Development of a Community and Its Culture. So you can find that with a search online, and we are in the section right now. Whoops, scrolled right past it. All right, I'm in the section titled Autistic Adults as a Resource for Parents, and picking up where we left off in the last video was, all right, here we go. We were willing to help them if we could because we did care about the welfare of their autistic child who couldn't communicate for herself. The NT world might call her low functioning and us high functioning, but we saw her as part of our world. Donna talked to Rita on the phone during the afternoon, and in the evening, Doyle came to Kathy's apartment to meet us in person. We did not meet the autistic foster daughter during that visit, but Kathy and I met her at many of our later gatherings. As it turned out, this particular set of parents respected us and liked us for ourselves, not merely as tools to help them understand their child. Kathy and I both formed lasting relationships with them, and in the coming years, they often opened their home and gave their support to other gatherings of autistic people. When Doyle and Rita and many other parents became our friends, we became comfortable sharing our space with them. They even became important parts of our community. But on that first evening during our first creation of Autistic Space, we knew them only as non-autistic people wanting to use us as a resource to help them with their child. And we responded with what has continued to be a characteristic feature of the autistic community that has grown from that first meeting. We set boundaries between the time we gave to them and the time we reserved for ourselves. We agreed to spend some time answering questions about our experiences of autism. But we set limits on how much time. The non-autistic parent came over. We talked with him for a while, and then he went home, and we had our own autistic space again. So this next section is titled Making It Happen, the Next Steps. So we spent a couple of days together, and we communicated and had fun and helped each other, and we talked to parents in the hope that our experiences might help them with their child. And we decided that autistic space was a good thing for autistic people to have. We decided to start our own organization rather than continue to be dependent on NT-run organizations. And NT, if you haven't heard that before, is short for neurotypical, meaning not autistic and not divergent. All right. So rather than continue to be dependent on NT-run organizations to help us find each other and to provide the only places we could meet. Since Kathy and I lived about 300 miles apart and Donna lived on another continent, we had to settle for distance communication, a printed newsletter, and a pen pal list for private person-to-person communication. This was modeled after a parent-oriented organization whose pen pal list had enabled us to make contact with each other. But our newsletter would be written by and for autistic people, not just another parent newsletter. I volunteered to edit it, and that's how I became coordinator of Autism Network International. And again, these are the words of Jim Sinclair I am sharing with you. We called it a network, not a community. At that time, I really didn't believe community would be a meaningful concept for autistic people. We don't tend to function very well in groups, let alone as groups. Autistic connections seem to be made on a person-to-person basis, one person at a time. In our new autistic network, we envisioned it. The newsletter would be the vehicle for information sharing among the group as a whole, while the pen pal list would allow for contact among people who wished to have person-to-person contact. Defining membership. Who are we? Right away, we had to make some decisions about who could be included in our organization. Autistic people only, or would parents and professionals also be allowed to join? High-functioning autistic people only, or all autistic people? At that time, it was still generally believed that high-functioning autistic people were a rarity. The term Asperger syndrome was just beginning to be introduced in the United States, and it has since been disintroduced in the United States, but that story is later. Autistic people who could speak fluently, who could read and write, who could demonstrate self-awareness and insight into their own experiences, who could participate in higher education, have jobs, and live independently. These were still viewed as novelties, exceptions to the general rule that autistic people are severely learning disabled. The fact that while many of us are capable of doing some of those high-functioning things, very few of us are actually capable of doing all of them is still not widely recognized. The tendency is to assume that those of us with a high degree of verbal ability are high-functioning in all other areas as well. The reality is quite different. All right, so Kathy and Donna and I had found each other through a pen pal list maintained by an organization of parents of high-functioning or more abled autistic people. We all communicated using language, both oral and written. We all had university degrees. We all lived on our own. Notwithstanding our various difficulties with sensory processing, social comprehension, emotional modulation, employment, adequate self-care, household management, and assorted other life skills, we were all considered to be high-functioning. We could have kept our focus only on other autistic people who were also high-functioning. But we had all fit descriptions of low-functioning autistic people when we were younger. We all recognized commonalities between ourselves and autistic people who were still considered low-functioning. We also recognized abilities and strengths in many autistic people who just didn't happen to share our skills in using language. We decided that our mission was to advocate for civil rights and self-determination for all autistic people, regardless of whether they were labeled high or low functioning, and regardless of whether they were able to participate independently in our language-based network. And I'm going to wrap this part up here and jump right back into this article by Jim Sinclair published in 2005 in the next episode, and find out more about how the autistic community online came to be here in the United States and where we went from there. Thank you for joining me for a bit more autistic history.